Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to Wonky Wednesday. In this video I want to do a Hexagon log cabin inspired piece. So that will have 6 logs. I'm going to use as my template, my Hexagon template from the, I can't remember what week it was, when we did English paper piecing, hidden histories in the weekly slow stitch. If you didn't do that and you don't have a Hexagon template, I will put a link down below as to how you can draw your own. It's pretty, straightforward. It only requires a pencil and a ruler. Mine has 3/4 inch sides, just for reference. And then the other things we need are obviously the 6 colours of the colour wheel. So I've got the 3 primaries, which are red, blue and yellow. Are they all in? And I've got just little scraps of each. And then I've got the 3 secondaries, which are purple, green and orange. Little tiny, I've got way too much here, but I didn't know what I was going to use. And then for my middle for the hexagon in the middle, I've got a little scrap of black. And I'm going to piece it all onto a foundation. Now it's not a square because a hexagon won't finish square because it's longer here than here. So I've got a rectangle-ish, I think it's about 5 inches by 6 3/4 inches, because my book pages are 5 inches. Did I say 5 by 6 3/4? I meant 5 by 5 3/4, sorry. So my book pages are 5, so it's going to hang off the edges a bit, or I might trim it, or we'll see. Again, full disclosure, I've never done this before. I have done hexagon log cabins, but not in this wonky way, in the measuring and getting the angles and all that kind of way. So let's move all this away. Oh, and the only other things are a needle, scissors, and I've just got a neutral piecing thread. So let's move all that. You can't see them anymore, but they're there. I've just moved them all to one side to give myself a bit of room. And I'm going to start with my hexagon template and my bit of black. And I've got a yellow watercolour pencil, which, if you can see, I have been seeing to see if it shows up. Just because it's black cloth, So I'm going to draw around it. And if you can't see it, you can lick the tip a little bit just to activate the, If you don't have watercolour, if you've just got a white pencil of some kind, or one of those quilters marking pencils, or perhaps on the back, your cloth will be lighter and you can just use a normal pencil. But as this is wonky, it doesn't have to be exact. Wonky gives you permission to be wonky. Right, so that's my template used. Put it to one side. I'm going to cut this out. Again, just roughly. And then we can make a start. Now I've been wondering whether to do it with a seam, right sides together, sew a seam, flip it back, or whether to lay it on raw edge. I think I'm going to do it with a seam. I don't know why, I just feel like it. But if you want to do it the other way, or a combination of the ways, or whatever, of course you do you. Now if you want to centralise it, you can't fold diagonal because it's not a square, but you can fold that way and that way, and then you can eyeball, you can, oh come on, come apart. You can put the points on this line, the points of your hexagon, if you want to, and then I just eyeball the centre, or you could fold your hexagon if you want to be super precise, you could fold your hexagon in half and line it up like that. I'm just going to slap it on. Slapdash that I am, but I always like to tell you, the way if you want to be accurate. Should we put an applique pin in it? No. So I'm going to start with the primaries. I'm going to start with the red, just because it happens to be at the top already. And I only need a teeny tiny bit because I'm going to just stitch it along this flat edge. But I'm going to, so I'm just wondering if I need to just cut off a tiny bit of that selvage, just because it's got a bit of a rough feel to it. It's a bit thick. So I'm just going to lay that on right sides together, matching it with the edge of that hexagon. So then when you stitch it, you'll flip it like that, and then you'll need to trim it in line with this. I do that when I think if I started trimming it first, it would get way too small and fiddly. So we'll do that when we're done. So I'm just matching that point to that point and making sure I've got enough to go past the other point. And I'm just going to do it, what is that, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8. A little seam. A little seam, enough to hold it all together. Which won't take me any time at all because it's so tiny. I can't get one more stitch in and out, so I'm just going to go back slightly and then go forward just to get me to the end. I'm going to leave that attached for now, up out of the way, so that I don't cut it in a minute when I trim. Just finger press that up like that. And then you need to just line up your scissors with this side of the hexagon. So you're actually going to end up with a little triangle. Make sure you don't cut through your thread. And then here with this side of the hexagon. See? So now I've got a teeny tiny triangle. Now I'm not going to do my next colour here. I'm going to miss one and do it here. So just to get myself there, I'm just going to stitch in what will be the seam allowance of that black hexagon. 2 or 3 biggish stitches just to get me to the right place, like so, and then turn it. So now we need the next primary, which will be, well, let's do blue. Excuse my arm, got a bit of chambray shirt. I'll use it that I might actually just cut a bit off because it's quite long, and about 1 inch-ish, ish. Same thing again. I'm going to come up through a little strip I just laid on and stitch my seam of whatever size it is. If you want to do this all super accurate, of course you can, you know, with 1/4 inch seams and so on. And only stitch to the end of the hexagon, don't stitch past it, otherwise you'll cut your thread when you trim. So same thing again, flip it up. That doesn't stay flipped, but it will in a minute when we stitch something else to it. It's too small even for an applique pin, I think. Same thing, trim it there. And these with a hexagon are 60-degree triangles. You know, hexagon's made up of 6 60-degree triangles. If you've got sort of the quilty stuff, quilters' rulers have 60-degree triangles on them usually. Put that in the scraps. So now I'm going to whiz along one side to get myself to the third alternate side. And then we need yellow. Oops. And then we need yellow. A few people have asked about using glue stick. People do that. I don't, but that doesn't mean you can't, you know. If you want to put a tiny weeny little dab of glue stick there, just to make that behave, you go for it. Let's have a bit of this. This is onion skin dyed. I'm going to cut a bit off that end because that's big enough, I think. And then that will be the 3 primaries. Yeah, I knew I wanted to do a hexagon. I've kind of known from the beginning when I was first thinking about doing these log cabin things, you know, and I thought through in my head all the different variations that were possible. And then I was thinking, what can I do that's, you know, 6 of something? And I thought, I know, the colour wheel. So it's taken me quite a little while to go through all my scraps and find colours, because I'm not really one for bright colours generally. Again, being careful not to cut the thread, make sure it's right over there, lining up with that line. And now we have got a little hexagon with 3 primary coloured, can you see, points. And you see it's now made a 60-degree triangle. Okay, so now we're ready to add the secondary colours. So I've stitched out here to the edge of this yellow. So now I'm between red and yellow, so I need orange, because red and yellow make orange. So I've got this bit of Auntie Lily's pillowcase. So here you just need to be long enough to reach these 2 points. So I'm going to stitch that onto there in exactly the same way. Because now with this round we're going to make it back hexagonal, hopefully. I'm just listening, I can hear something. Oh, it's alright, my husband's gone. I heard an engine outside. I'm just going to stitch my way all the way along to the point of the red triangle underneath there. And, oops, go where you belong, thank you. And I'm going to go right out to the point of that red. Again, if I can't get in another in and out, I go back slightly and then forward to make sure I come out right on that point. And this time I'm going to trim it before I flip it back. So I'm going to trim in line with the hexagon. Am I in? Yep, I'm in shot. Whoops. And the scraps. And the same the other side. And flip that up. Finger press it carefully because it's so fragile. And now I don't need to stitch myself out anywhere because the next piece is going to go from the point of the red to the point of the blue, and that's going to be purple. So some of this, because red and blue make purple. So again, just lining it up. I hope you can see with there's a little bit of the orange sticking out there, but I'm not going to worry about that. It's going to get hidden. So I'm just lining it up with the point of the red. Do you see? So I'm where the point of the red is under that seam. So I'm not going there. I'm going over the orange. If you're worried, just go a little bit further, and then you can always trim back. And then it has to be long enough to come to the point of that blue triangle. And then I'm going to stitch that down. Again with my, my seam allowance. I like the word allowance. Allowance itself seems very allowing. You know what I mean? I've always thought that with the term seam allowance, when you do proper quilting and they talk about a 1/4 inch seam allowance or a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Already if you put the word scant in, you're not being exact anymore. The scant is to allow for the fold of the cloth. Because when you press the seam, a bit of cloth ends up in the fold, so it's not exactly 1/4 inch anymore. But yeah, I always think the word allowance means I'm allowed. I'm allowed to not be accurate. Anyway, just going to do a little back stitch and a forward again, just so I end up right in that point. And again, trim. Now here I don't need to trim because I think it'll be alright, we'll see. But here I'm going to trim. And flip it up. So See there, it does need trimming a bit because this next piece will get stitched here. So I can, now I've flipped it up, I can trim it if I want to. You could also just leave it if it's a tiny bit and it's thin, it'll just be hidden underneath. So now we're ready for the third secondary, which will be, you've guessed it, we might just put an applique pin now in that because it's been flippy. Green. I have some of this limey green. So again, I'm just going to come a tiny bit past just to be sure. To be sure, to be sure. Come through from the back. And stitch that down. Yeah, the rainbow of colours, you know, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Was that all of them? When I was at school we were taught Richard of York gave battle in vain. Because the first letters of that phrase are the 7 colours of the rainbow. I just would be interested to know if other people have different things, because Richard of York was a king of England, so I'm sure that's not a global thing. I'm sure there are other mnemonics. Is that called a mnemonic? I think so. To remember the 7 colours of the rainbow. So again, before flipping, I can trim. So in line with that bit of orange, keeping the same angle. Again, if you're concerned, just trim it bigger. You can always trim a bit more off. And flip that up. Okay. I trimmed that, I didn't trim that. I trimmed in line with that. It should have been trimmed in line with that, do you see? Trim in line with the side of that orange. Not paying attention. Because now, and still not, maybe flip it up and trim. Maybe that's the best way. Flip it up and trim, and then you're sure it's right. Because the next piece is going to be the yellow again. Poor little bit of green's getting minced. And I'm going to go back here and trim it in line there as well, with the edge of that purple, because that piece there will be the blue. So we're back to a hexagon. I'll put an applique pin just to make it behave. Okay, so we've now got the 6 colours of the 6 colour wheel. So now I'm going to do a yellow again. A very wonky hexagon, but it is Wonky Wednesday. Show you some of this silk. It's a bit tricksy, but it's nice. I'm just gonna lay it on, stitch it, fold it and trim it, and then I'm sure. Then I'm sure. I'm not mincing the poor little thing. So here I'm lining it with the orange and the green, and if you were being super accurate, you'd make sure that you stitched right through the very point of that triangle. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? So that you had a nice pointy triangle. I'm not going to worry too much because I'm too busy trying to wrangle my silk into place. I'm just going to stitch and hope. A bit thick there because there's 2 crossing seam allowances. There we go. Flip it back. We've learnt our lesson. And that's definitely getting a pin because it's very tricksy. And then I'm going to trim with the line of that green scraps, even though it's tiny, it'll come in for something. And then the next colour is, and now we're just going to work round and round now, we're not skipping and going over there. We're just going to put orange next, I think. Just looking because it's got that bit of pinky purple on the edge. I'm just going to trim a tiny bit off because I don't really want that showing. I'm just being, you know, a bit finickety. And a bit of purple should be hidden in the seam allowance. Oh yeah, I'm not in the right place, am I? Now I have to do that stitchy out thing. I didn't do it there, I just jumped across it. You can just jump across when it's tiny distances, but I do think it's better to just stitch, really. Because if you have a great big long loop of thread, it can kind of pull. You know, you've got too much give. So we'll do one more round of all the colours and we'll see where we get to. Come on, up you come. Now I can see on the back now of my cloth where that bit of purple is, so I can make sure I hide it in the seam. And the same thing here. Oh no, you don't have to worry here. No, I was going to say the same thing here about the point of the triangle, but there's no triangle here because we're on the secondary colour side. The points are only on the first side of the primaries. If you're following me, I'm sure you are. There we go. Flip it up. That's good, that's okay. Should we do another pin? We seem to be going mad with the pins now. Trim that in line with here. Don't cut your piecing thread. I've done that so many times. Finally I learned to be more careful, apparently. You watch, I'll now cut it in a minute. So here, you have to look back to here for what colour you want. We're red here. You see we're going super wonky. Let's get a bit of something red. And that's a bit orangey red. See, now you start... Oh, that's really red. Apologies if you need sunglasses to look at that bit of red. That's a bit of red cotton. It's off the edge of a bit of cloth with a pattern in it, but it had a wide selvage on it. And somebody gave it to me a long time ago, and I was going to make a skirt out of it. And I haven't got around to it yet. And when I say a long time ago, I'm talking years. So I think I'm going to come right down here for my red triangle. You see my seam allowance there is getting about ½ inch wide. I'm just going to rectify that by laying my bit of red a bit lower down so that I stitch somewhere through the point of that triangle, because apparently that's necessary for me. What you could even do, if it was also necessary for you, is sort of look with a pin where it is. So I've got to pin through my seam of my red into the point of my triangle, like that. We're back to the obsessive pinning that I did in the rice bag video, and then take the pin out and put it back in, and then you know that's the point that you need to stitch through. Does that make sense? And I haven't stitched out now. Oh dear. Oh dear dear. I'll just do it without moving that bit of red out of the way. I think I can get away with it. Do pig. It'll all be hidden. So now I need to come into this red, and I need to take quite a big seam. Because I just like the look of those little triangles. So, you know, that's what I want, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just looking where my pin is there. because I know that there is the point. Take the pin out now. I think I'm close enough. And that's what I mean about seam allowances. You see the difference between that and other seam allowances I have made. Oh, sorry, I've got an itchy nose. Flip it up. And that bit of red's quite fine, and I can see that all that through it. So what I might do is just make sure I don't cut anything I shouldn't. I'm just going to have a little trim, particularly that dark purple that was really showing. I'm not cutting my thread now I've said that. Doing my trim in. But you see that I'm already, well, I've got to put the purple and the blue and the green yet. I'm already only within long distance hailing of Hexagon. We'll see, we'll see. It's good fun. It's pretty colours anyway, whatever it ends up being. So now I want purple again. Let's get a different purple. What have I got? That's a bit blue. See, when you look at colours, you can't really look at them in isolation. I mean, it's more purple there, maybe if I go for that bit. Because colours change depending on what colour you put them next to. And that's the fun and the tricksy thing about colours. It's not... Oh, I've forgotten again. I've forgotten again. And colours, I mean, colour is only visible light, isn't it? Colour's the part of the spectrum that the human eye can see. Other creatures can see further into the spectrum. Is it bees, I think, can see ultraviolet. And if you look at some plants under ultraviolet lights, what bees see are completely different colours to the colours that we see. But our human visible part of the spectrum, what we have... When I say we, it was actually Isaac Newton that first subdivided the colours into... I'm going to cut some of that purple out of there. This is really stiff cloth, I don't even know what this is. I think it's cotton, and I'm going to make it a bit thinner. Yeah, Newton did experiments in the mid-17th century, I think it was, with prisms, you know, those pyramid things that refract light. And he discovered that the prism split the light, refracted the light into the spectrum. Up until that point it was thought that the prism coloured the light in some way. Right, I'm going to do a reasonable seam here because that bit of purple underneath is quite wide. Again, you can just audition. I do it like that, maybe slightly higher. And this to me, and it's me, might not be everybody else, is more fun fiddling and auditioning than measuring accurately and knowing that if you sew your seams a certain width, that the piece that ends up showing will remain, will be a certain width. It's much more, for me, it's much more fun to play, and I much prefer the look of a piece when it's wonky. I don't only say that because I do wonky, because I know I can do super accurate. And that's not to, say, check me out, I can do super accurate, but for years I did do measuring and rotary cutting and so forth, accurate seam allowances. And I enjoyed it when I was doing it, but now I'm enjoying this. Right. So I'm lining this up with the edge of that red. And this with the side edge of the previous purple, because I know here I'm going to put blue next along this line. Can you see? Can you see? Can you see? I will show you where I'm throwing everything. I have here on my desk this big jar into which I throw scraps until it's full, and then I empty it into my bigger scrap basket. Well, or empty some of it into my bigger scrap basket. I'm not just throwing them, you know, into the abyss. This is really thick. It's not nice cloth really, but it's only a tiny bit. We'll suffer. Right, so now I need another bit of blue to go here. What shall we have? Is that long enough? Just, I think. Yeah, that's just long enough. We don't need you. It's a bit of flannel sheet that's been in the indigo. It's a bit wide, and I cut it a bit thinner. And sew it on. Yeah, so Newton apparently, when he first did his prism experiment and started, you know, his work on the spectrum, when he first started writing to people about it, you get a lot of information from letters that these people wrote to other people about, excuse me, about their work. Originally, he said there were 5 colours. He didn't include orange, and he didn't include indigo. So I had to do chicken stitch there because that thick piece of purple was too thick. And then later on he upped it to 7, because the spectrum is you know, the spectrum of colour is a thing. It's one entire thing, a spectrum. It's not, you know, there's not neat lines, all the 6 intervals along dividing it into 7. So it's a little bit, you know, arbitrary. And you see it with greens, you know, when you look at greens in particular, you can have really bluey greens, like, you know, your teals and turquoises, that some people will say are blue and some people will say are green. And then at the other end of greens, you have the sort of yellowy, limey greens that some people see as yellow and some people say, no, it's definitely green. That's a very interesting colour and endlessly fascinating. Pin that down because it's a bit thick. Trim a tiny bit off there just so it's vaguely straight. Even I will not put that in the scraps. That goes in the orts. Actually, I'm going to finish this thread off as well because it's too little. Do a couple of back... Excuse me, I lost my voice. Do a couple of back stitches. And trim there. And now we need more thread for a start, but we need another bit of green. And then we'll have had 2 of everything. You see? Do you see? Do you see? Need a bit of green. So, which bit of green shall I have? See, if I have that, that's still limey, yellowy green. I'm thinking I might go more for this. You see, this is much closer to the blue. Just so I've got a bit of balance in my greens. That's a bit of Polly-Wolly cotton. Polly-Wolly doodle all the day. And it's a bit thick. And it's got selvage, so for all those reasons I'm going to... Will it tear sometimes? Yes, with a bit of difficulty, but it did tear. Right, more thread. Yeah, whenever in the past I've been working on pieces with all the colours of the rainbow, which I did used to do quite a lot. If you wanted to stitch a rainbow or a spectrum, whatever you want to call it, and get your transitions, you know, and have lots and lots of colours, lots of shades of the same colour, so that your transitions were as fluid as possible from one colour to the next. the hardest transition to make was through the yellows into the greens and out to the blues, you know, through the greens. So that it looked almost imperceptible shift, you know, between the from yellow to green and from green to blue. That's a bit thick, that flannel. Stitching my way along. And that's of course the same Newton that discovered, or I don't think he didn't discover gravity, but he's known for the apple on the head thing. Did he discover gravity? I suppose he did. Luckily, he didn't invent gravity. Gravity was already there, luckily. Sorry. I think I thought that's what I'd said. I think I thought I'd said Newton invented gravity. I don't think that is what I said. But for a minute I thought maybe I had said that, which would be a silly thing to say. Right. That's definitely Polly-Wolly cotton because I can feel it under my needle. Now I've got a big long thread, I have to be super careful not to cut it. And get rid of him. Little applique pin. And now I have to decide if I'm going round once more or not. Whoops. I think I am. Do you know what? I think I am. Because then I'll have 3 of each, and I like 3s of things. So I'm just going to stitch myself out to the edge again. And I need a yellow. So now we're back just to, you know, we don't need to worry about pointy triangles or anything anymore. It was only that one round. What yellow shall I have? Let's have some of this. It's long enough. And I'm just auditioning. I'm just looking at my hexagon overall to see if I'm pleased with the... Because technically a hexagon should have exact 60-degree corners and all the sides should be the same length. But as long as it looks, you know, as long as if people look at it, what is that expression, from the back of a galloping horse, and say, oh look, there's a hexagon, then I'm happy. I must say, considering I don't often work with bright colours, I'm finding this visually quite pleasing. I don't think I'm ready to leave all my natural dyes and eco prints and grungy tea dyed stuff behind completely, but every now and then, you know, it's nice to do something a little bit different. Okay, flip it, press it, snip it. And of course, if you wanted to make a lot of these and join them together, you will have to do something where you could cut them out as hexagons and then join them, but then you'll have what are called Y seams. You know, if you have another one here, you're going to have to stitch a Y seam, which by hand is not that complicated to do. If it was me and I wanted to make something, maybe a table runner or something like that would be nice with lots of bright coloured hexagons, I would make them into rectangles. So I would make rectangle foundations, all the same size, and then I would piece my hexagons onto them. until I'd done the same number of rounds of each colour, and then I would rectangle them off, square them off, you know what I mean, not make them square but make them fit the rectangle, the same way that we did last week with the fried egg, the white rose of York, in that exact same way. And then you'd have lovely rectangles, all the same size, with brightly coloured hexagons in the middle of them. It's not wide enough, I want to widen a bit. Crumpled up bit. Not long enough. And that's really tricksy. Shall I just, that's a sample of, that's definitely polyester. Still got stuck on it from where it was stuck in the sample book. But we'll have it. We'll have it. It's bright, you know. If you're going to do bright, you might as well go mega bright. Really, really bright. Come on. It's better to use these things and have them going to landfill. As my neighbour gave me a lot of upholstery swatch books a couple of years ago, and various, you know, I don't know where she got them from. She does a lot of upcycling of things, you know, she makes things into lamps and decorates old furniture and things like that. So she'd picked these up somewhere, and because it was cloth she brought it to me. She uses bigger bits for reupholstering, but she doesn't do patchworky type things. And there was a little swatch book in amongst that. It is a very pleasing colour for all its shine. But if, even without the feel of it, which is obviously polyester, you can see from the surface, the weave is completely uniform. And also polyester feels kind of cold to touch and silk feels warm. I don't know if that makes sense. But the main thing is, if you're not going to set fire to it, which you could also do, please do it very carefully. You know, hold it with tongs and over a baking tray. I'm trimming before I flipped again. So now I need to trim again. Silk will burn to ash and polyester will melt because it's basically plastic. But if you're in a shop, you know, you can't go around setting fire to things. So please don't do that. Because it gets better and better, synthetic cloth, it gets better and better at imitating. But the main thing to look for is, if you look at the weave, polyester will be flat and uniform, whereas silk will have little variations and character to it. And if you can get two pieces of cloth that you know for a fact because they're labelled or whatever that are silk and polyester, and just feel and compare and look at them, and you know, if you're not confident at telling them apart, you can teach yourself. So I've now got 3 strips of each colour. And if we just have a look at it, because we started in the middle with alternate sides to make the triangle, and then we made it back into a hexagon with that side, and then we carried on just going round, you know, one side after the other. What we could have done then as well is, instead of starting here going round and round, which has made it look super wonky, we could have done then, you know, the blue, the yellow, the red, and then filled in with the primaries, and that would give you a different look again. So we could also have, like I said, started in the beginning and gone round red, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, you know, which would give you, because you see where the logs interlock and overlap. So there's much more playing that could be done with that. But what I'm going to do now, I've done my 3 rounds of each, is I'm going to just square off the corners a bit. I've got a bit more of my black. So exactly the same as last week, I want to sew something here. It'll be big enough that I can trim to that corner. So I'm going to, I could just sew that whole strip on, but that's a bit ungainly. So I'm just, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a big wide strip because I think you waste less. Excuse me, I'm ripping. You waste less, I think, if you cut a wide enough strip. Hopefully it's wide enough for everywhere now. We'll see. Or you waste less. Nothing's wasted, but you make less awkward shaped scraps. So I'm going to start. I finished with the yellow. Do you see? Because it hasn't got anything sewn over its ends. So I'm going to start here with the orange, which has got both its ends sewn over. It's always how you tell with log cabin. But here I need to be sure that I come right over. So when I've sewn my seam and I flip it back, it covers the entire rectangle. And what you could do then as well is put some black on these two straight sides, and then you've got a complete black frame. We'll see. Let's do this one first. One thing at a time. I need some more cotton because I used up my cotton and now I can't find the right needle, of course. Here we go. So, I mean, you know, you would get a different look if you put another round of colour on and then just tiny little slithers of black just to fill in the corners, but these colours made it to the edge. Then when you put your blocks together in whatever way you decided, you would have, the colours would meet here, but there'd be little almost diamond shapes in those pointy junctions. If you put black all the way around, you get much more of a framed effect. I suspect I might be doing more playing with hexagons as we go along. We'll see. We'll see if you like it or not. We'll see if you want more. We'll see if my bit of cloth will, where I tore it, it's gone all rumply and raggedy. So I'm going to come right over past the edge. Can you see me? Can you see me? Yep. Just to double check when you fold it up. You never know. Well, you do know with angles. There is a way to know, but I often make mistakes with angles. You know, when you've got it folded that way and then you fold it up and then suddenly you haven't got enough anymore. It's happened too many times, so I'd rather just make sure there's plenty. Right, that's that last stitch there. Let's see. To really be careful not to, actually probably I need to break my thread anyway if I'm not putting anything in there. I'm just going to finish that thread off with a couple of back stitches and cut it off. Right. And then this is exactly the same as we did last week with the rows. Turn it over and trim it from the back. Make sure it's laying flat. If you want to put a pin in it, if that helps you. I'm just trimming everything that's poking out past the foundation piece. Snippety snip. Again, making sure it's laying flat. Again and again. Why do I keep saying again? If you've got the rotary cutting stuff, you know, the square and the quilter square or quilter's ruler, you can go and rotary cut it. Do the black straight away, just frames it off nicely. So if I put a strip of black along there, how would that look? Let's have a look. I think I might do that. And if you wanted to make your foundation square and then you did this, you absolutely could, because this can be as wide as it needs to be to square it up. See what I mean? So you could do that as well if you wanted squares and not rectangles. So I'm going to stitch this to here, like this, and then trim it. I'm going to do this corner. I'm going to work my way around doing that, and then I'll come back when that's all done. Okay? Now I've come back because I had another thought. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do all the corners first, the 4 corners, and then I'm going to sew the side bits on. Okay, so that's all the corner pieces stitched on. went and got the big fiskars because it's easier to trim. If you've got, I think I did say it already, if you've got rotary cutters and quilters rulers, use them. I don't show using them because I'm thinking of people that don't have that stuff, and I want it to be accessible, you know, because this is all about not measuring and so forth. So I don't want to be, you know, expecting people to go and buy rotary cutters and mats and rulers, which can be quite expensive. It's quite an investment. So that's why I always do it here with scissors, you know, so that, you know, most people, you know, stop saying you know. Everybody's got a pair of scissors. Most people have got a pair of scissors, I would hope. So that's why. Every now and then people say in the comments, why don't you rotary cut that, or why don't you trim that block with a rotary cutter? Of course I could, and of course I probably would if I was here alone, but I'm thinking of people that don't have that stuff. Right, so I'm just going to stitch this all the way across, one side to the other. Okay, so I've sewn a strip top and bottom, and I've just turned off over the strips because they were wide, because I do think I might, I'm not sure yet, make it square, you know, make it finished square. But you see it's super wonky, it's sticking out here, and it's, but I must say I really like it. And you could do any number of things with that, of course. It's a block. You could make 4 and make a box like we made last week with the rose. You could make a rice bag. You could make like a tote bag. You could either have that as one centre one with something else around the edge, or put 4 or 6 or however many together. Table runner, table mat, the world's your oyster. It's, you know, it's a block. And when you have a foundation square, whether you decide on a square or a rectangle, I'll just show you if it was a rectangle how it would have looked. It would be like this. Like I said, I'm in 2 minds as to which I prefer. I think I prefer the square because I like it with more black at the top and bottom. But, you know, there you go. If you have the principle of a foundation square keeping you accurate, in inverted commas, you can then join those units together. That's the point of being accurate, so that you've got roughly the same size pieces to join. So I hope you like that. Bright colours from me for a change, and a little bit of chat about very scratching the surface of colour theory and so on. Next week we'll see what happens. There might be more hexagons, there might be something else. Hello, it's me again. Of course, I had to come back to say that, yes, I did realise when I was editing that I had 4 strips of yellow, which was why my hexagon was super wonky down in this corner. So I have taken the 4th strip out and replaced the black corner. So it looks much more, you know, symmetrical. And I hope you can see that I have done some stitching. All I did was running stitch in the relevant colour on each section, and then I extended that running stitch into the black hexagon in the middle. So where it's green I did green, blue and so on, and then exactly the same thing around the outside. And then I just went around the very outside of the whole thing with black thread, and I've stitched it to my page. And it is a bit too wide for my book, and instead of having it hanging out here or here, I've got it hanging into the spine a bit, which is absolutely fine. When I close it, it just gets a little bit folded. Anyway, I bet you're all shouting at me, Catherine, you've got 4 strips of yellow, that's why your hexagon's super wonky. So, I'm very pleased with it now that it's right. And I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed watching me make a mistake. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.